So to make the perfect bundle, you will need a pair of gloves. You will need a piece of natural fabric. So here I have some recycled cotton, probably part of a tablecloth. I think this one came from a charity shop in Ireland last year. It's been nicely washed, rid of all the conditioning agent there could be, and it's wet. Okay, so it's better to have the fabric into water for a little bit to make sure it loosens the fibers. And then I'm going to use this time a very simple mordant, which is just iron sulfate. So this is iron sulfate powder diluted into water. The strength is about 1%, 1.5%. So that would be about 5 grams in a bucket of this size, and then just water. You can keep it for a while. You just have to close the tub. Make very sure that it doesn't spill, because iron water is rust, so it will stain you. Then you dip the fabric into the iron water, and that is going to be your mordant. Your mordant is what makes the fiber bite to the dye, because what you're going to do is put onto this fabric some leaves and various botanical material that have in them either a pigment or a dye, a natural dye, which is going to transfer onto the fabric. So you want some little help with this, because it wouldn't happen just naturally. So you've got this, is quite wet now, and what we are going to do, so we probably had something on the fabric already, because we now have a little stain, but it doesn't matter, it will not show really too much. So we're going to do a mix of leaves, new leaves and old leaves. Now normally from May onwards I would probably work with some, it's the indigo which is here, so we're going to cover this. I have some particles of indigo on this paper. This has been used before, so we're going to fold it away. And I wouldn't worry too much, because once it's been dyed, this will disappear in the background. It won't actually show too much at all. Okay, so I always start with the fabric, and what I will do is now display some leaves. So from May onwards I would use natural leaves from outdoor, tree leaves or some weeds, but it's a little bit early in the season yet, and at the moment there isn't really anything that's quite strong. So I have some leaves which I picked up last autumn in the various park, and I had dried, and I keep those for backup when I have an urgent need to do some eco printing and I have nothing to print with. So a good variety of different things. That's the cotinus, little ornamental tree. That's acer. It's quite bright red in the autumn. And I also have some leaves from trees, true trees, so a form of oak. All those leaves will give a good print. Now I kind of know my leaves from now on. This one is from Lansdowne Crescent. It's one of the red kind of maple type tree, which goes here. And I have also some fresh ones. So this is an Elleborus, one of the winter roses. When you have tree leaves, you want to make sure that the veiny side of the leaf is applied onto the fabric you are printing. But when you are playing with flowers, and not all flowers work, so we'll just have a try with this, you actually put the flower upside down, like face down onto the fabric, and press it quite strongly. Now I know that those will give some kind of print. And then something which works really nicely at all times of the year is this little baby, but you have to be careful with those, that they tend to give a kind of milky secretion that not everybody's skin likes. So I would be just gentle, and if it's your first time playing with those, then I might just decide to wear gloves. I tend to know now what works with my skin and what doesn't. You can do a little variety of things. Now, I'm going to print this time paper and fabric. and both of them are recycled. Now the fabric, most of the fabric recycle I use is from a bed and breakfast in the West End called Amadeus Guest House. Thank you, Amadeus. And most of the paper I use is from various projects I work on, and I'm left with paper bits. So some kind of geranium type leaves, which usually give quite a strong color. Now I tend to know which one give what color. The colors are not always what the leaf is, but they are quite predictable. Eco printing, which is what this is actually more like a science than an art. It's a chemistry reaction, and it will always work the same way. So I'm going to plunge this into a bath of natural dye, and actually I decided to pick something that was close to my kitchen, just some onion skin, because they come for free, so that's really quite handy, and they always give a good result. But also they don't stain, and they're quite easy to use, so I think for a first time that's quite good. Okay, so my fabric is more or less covered. Okay, so as you can see, I'm covering most of the fabric, which means that those little blue dots will be completely covered and won't show at all. Now, as you go along, if you decide to take on this technique, you can experiment with lots of different leaves, and you will find, depending on the season, you will get different kind of print, depending on the leaf, depending on the background. So then it's just a matter of doing a lot of playing and understanding your leaves. Okay, that's me. So now I have enough leaves, and I have here a piece of paper I cut earlier. So this is actually lining paper left over from a building site. Which I quite like because it does boil really well. It doesn't get destroyed. Some of this indigo project I had started. And I have a little piece of wood because I am going to make sure that this is rolled around my wood. Now I'm kind of touching here. I have this flower which I put down, and I make sure it's really nice and flat. If you have something that's a little bit bunchy, what will happen is when you're rolling, it's going to not give you a great contact between the fabric and the leaves, and you're going to end up with some unclear print. Now, the reason I'm putting the fabric on the outside and not on the inside, it's because the fabric will absorb the dye and the heat much faster than the paper, and so if you put the fabric on the outside, you will end up with a bit more color on your bundle. Now here I've decided to have the fabric a bit shorter than the paper, and that will again create a passage for the dye to come in. Okay, I have a little bundle here, so this is just a really simple process. Iron is not the greatest modern of all, but it works really well for little projects like these. Now, I could use string if I had any, but I find the elastic bands, the big ones like this, they're quite quick to put on, they're quite tight, but more importantly, they're very easy to take off, because when this comes out of the pot, it tends to be really hot, and if you have a string with a knot, then it makes it quite difficult to take off. Now, the reason I'm arranging the elastic band around the bundle is because everything you put between the dye and the fabric will create a resist, and with that resist, you will get a mark of some sort. So if you do a bit of a twist, you'll get a bit of a twist. If you have a cross, you'll get a cross. So if you're quite fussy about the look of your bundle, then you want to spend a little bit of time organizing your elastic or your string. Now this is just a quick one, so we will not be too fussy. And I have my bundle ready to go. If you have several people working in the same pot, then at this stage I would add something to your bundle to identify it so that you know it's yours when it comes out. Because you may say, oh, my bundle looks like, I know what it was like, but actually when it comes out it will be so different that you will not be able to remember it. So at this stage you could add like a little bit of a twig or a button or a knot or something to make sure you remember this is yours. And this will go into the pot of dye. So we're going to move to the pot of dye. I have here a pot of onion skin. So these are red onion skin, which have been brewing nicely in this pot for half an hour. And indeed, it gives you a red dye. But actually, what is really interesting is that when you put your bundle in it, here we go, and you give it like a little second to take the dye. Okay. Give it a little shake, and you take it back out. The dye is actually green. And the reason for this is, I said earlier on that this technique is in fact a big bundle of chemistry. Onion skin dye is pH sensitive, and what we've done is we have put into this pot something that was coated with iron sulfate, which is very acidic. It's changed the pH of the dye bath from alkaline to acidic. And it's quite interesting, isn't it? I love doing this with children because you pop something in the red dye and it comes out green, and you think, oh, maybe it's just not been long enough. Pop it back in, shake it about, it comes out and it's still very much green, and it will not become red. And that is just simply because this dye is now got very acidic. So if you had some pH strips with you, you could just pop them in the dye and you would notice that it becomes quite acidic. Now, in a second, I will take out the skins out of the pot because they've now given out their dye. They have no need to be in there anymore, and they will probably affect the leftover, the look of the piece. I close these, and I'm going to leave it to simmer gently for maybe a big hour, and we'll come and see what comes out of it.